Hello, everybody, and welcome back to my author's chat of the week. And as I wait for my co host, I have some exciting news. Actually, tomorrow I will be back live solo, which I don't do a lot of solo lives, but that's because I'll be a starter for a book, The Underrealms.
There she is.
How are you?
How are you, Miss Katharine?
I am doing well. I love your artwork in the back.
Oh, that's just a poster. I didn't do that. I can't take credit.
well,
I do enough. I
I
produce enough of my own art. I'm not going to take credit for somebody else's.
I did notice that when I was looking at some of your stuff of the fact that you're also an artist as well as an author. So that's fantastic.
Right. It's just coming out everywhere. Yeah.
Exactly. So how I usually do these is I will usually let whoever is co-hosting, which will be you this week, introduce yourself and about you, your work, your writing, if you want to talk about some of your art as well. And then I'll do the same because we always have new people jumping in, and then we'll go where the day takes us.
Outstanding. So I am Dennis McFarland. I go by Brother Dennis, Mr. Dennis, many different things. The the books that we're talking about here, I have The Church of Mars, Razor Mist, is the culmination of about 15-year project, ministry project for it. I call my wife the Queen. Her name is Melinda. Uh, um, I work in corrections, and so I took to calling her the Queen because I didn't want them looking her up on Facebook.
Now, fair enough.
Right, but it's not just a nickname for her. It's who she is to me. Also, it's not just a nickname. Um, it's based in many things, but I can share one story, kind of our experience together, that was kind of a springboard for this whole thing as it is today. The first book, First Church of Mars, is a nonfiction book. The idea behind this book is simply if we could start church over again. I mean, this is a hard time for Christianity the way I see it. We don't really. We heard another preacher say, I forget who it is, but the wife and I are always quoted as saying we go to church more than Jesus does because we've been in some services when he wasn't there. And it's bad. It's a hard time for Christianity. So my first book is, let's take all the man-made tradition out. The first story I'll share with you is kind of how that began for me on our journey. Start over again on Mars. Pull all the man-made tradition out and just boil it down to what is necessary to practice the religion of Christianity. It's many people that I've counseled over the years who say to me after I explain these things to them, who always say, I've never heard anybody say it like that, or I can actually do it if that is what it is. And those affirmations and me talking to people is kind of the fuel behind what we're doing here.
Okay, yeah.
So First Church of Mars is throw everything out we don't need. Here's how that looks both individually and collectively. And then Razor Mist is just a fun tale. It's meant to be illustrative in nature. If such a faith community existed, the main character in Razor Mist is a female assassin. She's trained from birth. And she runs into and encounters, while doing a job that has gone bad for her, this kind of faith community. And it's, does God love everyone, even a professional killer? And the emphatic answer to that is yes.
Very nice.
Okay, so the first story. So we've struggle builds relationship, right? And there are many people in our gravity that would say that the Queen and I, you will not meet another couple like us. And so early on in our marriage, I hurt my back. I was working in a transmission shop. Oh my God, it hurts to even tell this tale again.
Oh no.
I was working in a transmission shop. I was putting away stock in the back room. I was up on a ladder. Silly me, young me with a strong back at the time, hugged one to my chest to bring it down off of there, and the ladder kicked out from underneath me, and I twisted with that transmission in my arms. I ruptured my L4 and L5, the lower two most like at the base. Most people rupture side to side. My ruptured front to back. I can't even mimic now like the shape that my body was in during that time of my life. I had this red recliner that was in our living room. It's literally only when I went to the restroom, I spent literally 24 hours a day minus restroom breaks in that recliner for like 4 months.
Wow.
Yeah, it was horrific. They ultimately wound up doing steroid shots into those, infusing them. So like now I'm like lifting weights and doing push-ups and madness again. If I shovel snow, I can wake up sore and have to lay on the couch for 30 minutes or so. But other than that, I'm pretty much healed. Thanks to God and modern medicine combined. So in the midst of all that, let me tell you that when I healed, the first thing I did as soon as I was able was pick that recliner up and carried it out to the trash.
Don't blame you.
Yeah, goodbye, friend. It did serve me well during that time. So I was fresh into Christianity at the time. I have a traumatic childhood. And then I just kept on with the trauma for myself for a while after that. Christianity is the result of many different paths that I arrived at Christianity. It's not that I didn't try Wiccanism, Buddhism, and can literally talk intelligently about any other religion. It's like the more you understand other people's way, the more you understand your own, if that makes sense. And so I love to engage people in conversations about their belief structures, because in some ways it helps me kind of patch together things I might not have solidified for myself, right?
Okay, yeah.
So we literally, the church teaches the concept, the idea of the tithe. Are you familiar with the concept of the tithe? 10% of, and it's supposed to be bless God out of your gross, not out of your net. Take that 10% off the very top. And so literally we find ourselves many times in a position where we have the rent check in one hand and the tithe check in the other. Like, what does the word really say about this? And you learn a lot. You know what I mean? For me, being a person who was not raised in church, and because of my addiction and the turmoil and the result of my journey, arriving there and not finding it the way that I expected it to be. You know, I grew up in the party culture. A friend with weed is a friend indeed. You know what I mean? and I used to throw down my girl when I was younger. And I mean, hopefully age and experience and wisdom overtakes a person, and they learn and can separate themselves for that before it swallows them up. And I have counseled a lot of people that it swallowed them up. You know, they're trying to find a way out. You have to have a heart for those people, and you have to get in there with them. I have a whole thing. It's a message that I teach: hug the homeless. You know, if the love of Christianity is not expressed in you to the point that you can hug the homeless, then you ain't got it right yet. You don't have it right yet. And I don't mean with the disgust in your eyes and in your heart either, but like with the genuine love. I don't care how you smell. I don't care how you look. Real, genuine, true love. And I'm telling you, it's hard to find. It's my sister. I find that it's hard to find. We've been to many churches, and we're unorthodox in the way that the faith kind of finds its expression through us. And we haven't found a tribe for ourselves yet. So it's born out of that first struggle of, do we pay the tithe? We pay the rent first. And you talk to people in the church, they're all going to tell you, bless God, pay, you got to give God his and he'll give you yours. There's that little 90% you got left, and the 10%, there's a million sayings for it in that culture. And so we tried that, and our situation got more and more destitute. We became more and more indebted to more people. And it's like, my heart was touched, like, this doesn't make sense. Why should my burden be on other people? And you don't read about burdens in this. So what are we doing wrong? I have a whole chapter in my first book, First Church of Mars, dedicated to this. I don't want to get into the whole thing now, but what you find out, Deuteronomy chapter 14, and I can go chapter and verse with anybody. And let me tell you, my sister, I'm an outspoken person, and I mean to make trouble. Okay, I mean to make trouble. But not in a mean way, you know, in a good-hearted way. I want people to understand that this isn't as hard as you make it, and it's not as hard as other people are going to try to make it for you. My heart hasn't always been this way. Some things I had to really go through some turmoil myself in my adult years to arrive at how this finds expression through me now. What makes these books and what we're trying to do with Thicker Than Water Ministry so important. So Deuteronomy chapter 14, it literally says, eat your tithe. And so this whole kind of series system of the true way, what was truly meant by tithe and who was truly meant for. Martin Luther King, Martin Luther, the church, it's Martin Luther King Day. Let me take a breath for a minute. I'm a passionate speaker. If I don't slow myself down, and if you don't slow me down, I'll just, you'll never get a word in.
Well, let me ask you a couple of basic questions for people about you and your writing. And obviously,
I got stories, my girl.
That's great. That's great. But obviously, you know, you wanted to express your belief system and put it into a book so people can find approachable and reach and read and hopefully understand what you're trying to express. you mentioned kind of in the beginning that this has been part of potentially up to, I think you said like a 15-year
15
process.
plus, yeah.
When did you begin writing your first book, and how long did it take you before you finally were able to publish it?
Oh God, that's razor mist. I'll tell you, it's crazy that this is a friends of ours adopted a girl from China. It's from what I understand, my little limited knowledge. I don't want to speak out of turn. I try real hard not to speak out of turn, believe it or not.
Mm-hmm.
Adopted. There was a law over there that there's a limited number of children, so the orphanages are full of Chinese girls over there, and their heart was moved by that. And they have their own story to tell our friends on how they come to adopt Leah from China and bring her here. So my heart got moved for that, and so the character in this book, Razor Mist, her name is Misty. Her killer name and assassin name is Razor Mist. There's a whole thing in the books. Listen, I don't know if you use the King's English. This is a badass story. It's a good story. She's a female version of me, is what she is. It's funny how, answering your question, I started writing Razor Mist 15 years ago. I literally have spiral notebooks, napkins. I got a whole weird collection of stuff with stuff written on it because I don't want to forget when the idea comes to me, because who knows, I may find myself in a point in time later on in life where I'll have time to write these things. I got ideas for a dozen books if I got the time to do it. Just life has kind of taken things over for us recently and pushed that time out for a little bit. 15 years ago, I started writing Razor Mist. And I'll tell you, there's been no bigger fan of Razor Mist than the Queen. As soon as I finished a chapter, and there's times I can speak on as far as being a writer. We can talk towards being a writer on, you got to make yourself do it every day, right? If you mean, the publishers don't care about your good ideas, my girl. They don't. They need finished products. And you got to make yourself. How many people, man, have got great books inside them, but they just don't discipline themselves to sit down and write it. Listen, and getting published is only, was it not a most surreal moment for you the first time, your first book, when you sat and held that in your hands and it's got your name on the cover?
Oh, yeah. That was definitely a moment you can't forget.
Yeah, it's the breath of God, right? That I created. It's beautiful. It's beautiful. I've done it twice, but you got a whole library, my girl.
I have a few.
Right. Yeah, it's just a 15-year journey, bringing these chapters to my wife. And then I pastored a church. I went to Bible college. So, I mean, taking what has been an explosive amount of stories, boiling down to just keeping it time interested here. When my back went out, I also lost my work. We had a home. We had to file bankruptcy on our home. And through a wild series of events there, I could write a whole book, my life story, and either call it a wild series of events or I'm an ordinary person and extraordinary shit happens to me all the time.
Absolutely.
Back went out, and as things unfolded, I wound up going. We lived in a trailer in Bible college. It was Circleville Bible College at the time. It's Ohio Christian University now. I feel fortunate enough to have attended there when it was Circleville Bible College. I think that much of the tradition and the things that I kind of loved about it when I went there kind of maybe necessarily had to fade away for the new things to take place there. I'm not bitter about sometimes you got to chop those traditions off. I'm all about that. If it ain't working, cut it off. Stop doing it. Find something that works. So I wound up at Bible college, and after there, listen, so you're talking about a guy who wasn't raised in church, who just found this wonderful relationship and this great spirituality to move forward in, and then it just exploded into my life. There's elements of the old me, though, that you still carry with you. I can talk on that forever, too. Then I became a pastor. We left out of college, and I pastored a church for 7 years. And I'll tell you that the last 2 years of that were the worst years combined in both of our lives. The things we were subject to by fellow Christian people. And I'm not talking about just in, difficult relationships in the church that we were in, but the kind of I won't say their name because I'm not trying to throw shade on people. I'm more just speaking on my experience. It's not necessary to shed negative light on those people. They know who they are. The story of my ordination. I can wrap up my whole experience by telling you one story. The past I came out of and the trauma and everything, and I found the spirituality, and I'm trying to rise up in the ranks of this thing. And the highest level there, and it's the ordination. There's local license, council license, ordination. And I'm working through these things, and I have a whole identity struggle. You talk to me for any amount of time, you'll find that I'm not like any other, probably what you would consider religious people. I carried my 20-year-old me into my 50s.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's me trying to adapt and trying to figure out what my character is and to be like the people around me and put my past behind me, like, this relationship and spirituality says I'm supposed to be able to. And I worked my way all the way through the ranks. It was a big thing, like the auditorium where they do these presentations. It's like, it probably seats about 2,000 people in their auditorium. It's a big group, lots of people there because I wasn't the only one being ordained that day.
Mm-hmm.
And this is a culmination of about 4 years' work and like book work and study and a certain number of sermons. You had to preach a certain number of places. Those people had to be able to feed into it and say, yeah, he's not an idiot. And it was a lot of work. I put a lot into that. And I get up on the stage and literally the guy puts his arm around me and just says, puts my whole resume out there about my past. Dennis comes to us, but he used to this, God bless God. And I'm just like, thanks, guy.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
You literally just took, the 4 or 5 years of work of my life. If you want to add college, probably 10, and just,
mm-hmm.
Right. That literally is sitting in a cardboard box. It's a big, nice plaque. It's an impressive plaque, but it's just a piece of wood to me in cardboard in the bottom of my toolbox, whatever. And there's oh my God, and how much, there just isn't time for this story. There's not. Things that happened since I got out of college and struggling with the people that we did at the church. It ultimately came down to one board meeting there where it was basically either you're going to do the thing that we ask you to do because I'm the pastor, and it is my responsibility as pastor is to be the priest of you, the flock. I'm supposed to get the spiritual direction. We're supposed to work together to see how can we accomplish this. Let me tell you, any pastor, a Christian pastor who might be watching this or listening to it now or later will tell you board meetings are the most horrific things that they have to experience.
I think that's not just for board meetings in general.
Board meetings in general. Can be very tip a cup of coffee to, forget board meetings. As a pastor, they're the worst. Because how do I convince these people that a thing that I know solidly in my heart, I could literally duck, goose everybody in that congregation at the time on how this would benefit them individually, this move, and collectively, us as a church towards growth. It would have been a beautiful thing. They just decided they didn't want a part of it because it was in a rough neighborhood. There's a whole other intricacies to the story I'm leaving out to that. So as a result, there were some people in that neighborhood who said, well, if they don't want you, we do. And so this lady opened up her garage. And literally, I preached services in her garage with people sitting in lawn chairs in the driveway. And that was drawing more crowds for me than the Wednesday night or Sunday night crowds at the church that I just come preaching at 7 years out of. And these people, they never went to the church. They never felt comfortable there, but they felt comfortable with me. So that's kind of where First Church of Mars is born out of. It's if you ain't got anybody out there teaching it, then people don't know.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so First Church of Mars, taking the long way around answering your question, it starts with Razor Mist 15 years ago. But there was elements of Razor Mist that I couldn't get a hold of. And then First Church of Mars, I wrote in probably a year after that whole church experience, like what do people need to know? What's important? And what can we throw out that's choking Christianity out and making it unfruitful? Let me tell you how many young people I have counseled who come to me with tears in their eyes and tell me that they've come out to their mom and dad and they've been kicked out of their home. Listen, if you're a Christian mom and dad and you've done that to your parents, and I hope you don't think you're going to be in the same heaven I am. Right? You ain't going to be my neighbor. It's just the church is turning out brokenhearted people is what it's doing. At least in my gravity, it seems true. And I'm not saying in other places in the world that it isn't doing great things, but I'll tell you, my personal gravity, it's garbage. The people what they subject people that they allegedly love to around them to, we got to do better. It has to be better.
Yep. If God is love, God loves everybody.
Yeah, and doesn't show favoritism at all to anybody. No one from the beginning of time until whenever he decides to come back or manifest or whatever's going to happen next. Let's talk about the publishing journey, right? Because I'm sure some writers have turned into this as well. So both these books are in hard copy, Barnes & Noble and Amazon, whatever your preference is. Apple, I can get them there too. We had this, oh my God, man. April, this is still an open case, so I can't say a lot about this, but I need
Well,
to
let me
speak
pause
to it.
and ask a question because this kind of
Okay.
pertains to what you're doing.
Okay.
And you're talking about where your books are found, Barnes and Noble, Amazon.
Mm-hmm.
Are you an indie author? Are you hybrid, or how? Yeah, how did
The
they come to be
publishing
that?
journey.
Yeah.
These books are published through Page Publishing. Let
Okay.
me tell you, if we want to give advice to potential writers or people who have this great idea and they've actually disciplined themselves and sat down and wrote it.
Takes time.
Yep. Do it. Write it. Get it down. Every publisher, probably they all have their own guidelines, and if you don't, first, good luck finding a publisher that is willing to accept works from unsolicited works from somebody that nobody knows.
It's hard.
Right? And so you got to wade through who's taking submissions. Then each person has their own set of submission guidelines, and you take the time to read those carefully, because I promise you, they'll chuck it. Yeah, they already have their job. Yeah, right. And you might have the best novel in the world, but if you don't send it in the right way. So I went through 5 different ones. Page Publishing, it's just self-publishing, but it's kind of a partnership. You give them it's like 20. I think it wound up being like 28 grand, but they handle like everything. You keep creative license of your stuff. Yes. But they handle distribution and all that kind of stuff for you, advertising to a degree. Some things I wish I'd known going into that relationship with them. My first book was First Church of Mars, because when First Church of Mars kind of came together for me, it's like elements of that was like, oh, now I know what's missing from Razor Mist. And it's beautiful how they just stitched together. It's like, now I know why I've been working on this for 15 years, you know what I mean? Or 12 or whatever it was, when it culminated. It was beautiful. In how many ways, even now that I have time post, mad stuff that's happened, to go back and see just how well and how beautifully these two books connect with each other, even in ways that wasn't intentional to me at the time. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I'm going to pause for 1 second. I see we had a comment pop up while we were talking saying, I'm struggling with starting the writing process, doing too much of the research. There's a lot of research that goes in the beginning, so we've all been there. It can be overwhelming.
Balance. Just make sure you're balancing between research and writing, right? Research is the hard part. Writing is the fun part. So I'd say,
hopefully, you want it to be the fun part. Yes.
Well, make sure you're doing one or the other every day, I say. Again, that's that daily discipline. It will not write itself. You got to make yourself do it. There's a book called Stephen Pressfield called The War of Art. I recommend that book. I've bought probably 10 copies of it and given it to people.
Wow.
It literally talks about that the blocks to the creative process and how to tear through those. And the overarching theme of that book is make yourself do it. You got to make yourself do it.
Yeah. Well, talking about a little bit of your creative license and what you do versus your publishing house, were you in full control of your book cover designs, or did you let the publisher decide all that?
That's a great story, actually, for Razor Mist. I'm an artist, right? And so I had a written description as part of yes, I have full control over what I wanted on the cover of this. And come on, how important is the cover image? Right? You can you can sell or not sell a book based on what's on the front of it.
Absolutely.
And secondary to that is the summary on the back. You got to grab them with it. Yep. So what we're talking about? Oh, the creative process. I'm sorry. The brain train, you understand. The brain train never pulls over. Sometimes I skip a call.
It sometimes goes too fast. You have to slow it down.
And I find most super intelligent, creative people do that. Right? So for Razor Mist, it was a written description of the cover. And I meant for it to be like it's a gritty tale. This takes place in the darker parts. She's an assassin and she has to move around in those circles and also stay hidden. The written description of my girl, the people in my Gravity, the first cover art design that they sent me, like their artists go, here's what we came up with. It was everyone in my Gravity laughed at that. We were like, what is this?
Doesn't work. No.
No. And it was actually inspired by my friend Heidi, how she wound up at Heidi Harris Writes, the hardest working girl in show business. One of them. Did you stay in contact with her? Did she quit her job and is just focused on her writing now?
Wow.
Yeah. I'm like, you go, girl. Go. So she suggested, you're an artist, draw your own cover. And so I had like a drawing that I did, like kind of here's kind of what I want. And I borrowed some Google images and I sent this whole package to them. And then that's what they wanted. It's not bad. It's not bad. Nice. Tactical. It's tactical.
Exactly.
But also weird and mysterious. I think it's a great story.
That's fantastic.
Okay, so
yeah, for me,
I had creative control of that. The hard part, what I wanted to remember to talk to you about before we get too far away from how much control we do not or do have. First Church of Mars is also an audiobook. Before this great life change happened for us, we had enough money to fully pay that off and get that done. What was weird about that, though, is they let you have to pick a voice actor to do your book, and I can only hear it in my voice. So it was like, it was weird and surreal to listen to other dudes do my book. Like, I don't know. I settled on a guy, obviously, but it was like I settled because it ain't me.
Yeah. Yeah.
And now that you've talked to me and people that are listening to this, and if they read my book, they'll hear it in my voice, and that'll make more sense to them. Like, yeah, I'm doing this.
Yeah, no, that's always interesting. I just started doing audiobooks for my work this past year and trying to find the right voice actor or actors for your work is one of those weird, surreal, like you were saying, things, because you have your own voice or voices in your head of how it should be read, and then someone else does it a little differently or sounds different or whatnot, and you have to decide, is this a good thing or is maybe not so good? And you have to decide. That is a decision, which is kind of fascinating. Another comment popped up and said, what are some daily discipline tips to sit down and write instead of overthinking everything? So what would your tip be?
I have actually a whole story in First Church of Mars about when I do my devotional time. It's and without fail, no matter how horrific my life has become, sometimes I don't know, I don't pick up the Bible and actually read it as much. I know that book better than anybody. That's not an excuse to read it every day. You know what I mean? I'm not as daily diligent with that, but I take my prayer and devotional, my reflective time every day at the end of the day, without fail. And I have a little story I tell in the book about shortening it down. I wanted to build that bubble. Like I needed to be perfectly quiet. Nobody come to the door, and I want the dog scratching. And if the phone rings, if you bust the bubble, the whole thing's done, and I'm done now. And having to teach myself, it's more important that I take the time. Let the dog in. Answer the phone. If the wife has a question, answer the question. And it's the story in there. So I wanted to put these headphones on to shut out the noise of the TV upstairs. But there's this whole comical thing about needing an adapter, the right adapter, and not knowing where that was. And I found myself searching for this adapter, and I'm like, what am I doing? I'm supposed to be downstairs taking my time, So I woke up into it like that. Make yourself do it. Set aside a time. It doesn't really have to be the same time, but just prioritize it. Before I go to bed today,
prioritization is a key.
Yeah,
and if you're starting off and you don't know how focused you can stay, a lot of people do writing sprints. They're not big. They're set at like 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes. You can get them big. You can big them to an hour or 2 hours, but whatever it is, say this is my time. I'm sitting down. Put a little timer on and try to focus your attention as much as possible on just writing. Then if you need to get up, stretch, whatever, you can always come back and do another 5, 10, 15 minutes. And that works for a lot of people. For me, I'm a creature by habit. So I already know at this time, this morning, in the morning, that's when I sit down and I'm writing from hour 10 to hour noon, till noon. So a couple hours, I just sit down and put down new material, opening up other times a day for me to do other things. Another comment just popped up saying, yes, I do it in the mornings for my devotions. Otherwise, I keep putting it off until bed. So once you become a, routine, people are creatures of habit, and you make it a part of routine, prioritize it. I think that's a great way to go.
Well, I think state of mind is also important, though. If I'm going to take that time, then I want to be engaged in it, if that makes sense. And so, I mean, so there's I guess there's a limited number of distractions that you have to accept, though. If you're going to prioritize that time, okay, the phone might ring. The wife might have a question, but more importantly, I can come back to this and make sure I do this. And as far as writing, like if writing is the thing separately that we're talking about, I really got to a place where it was just important that I took the time every day to do it. So sometimes if I sat down and just made myself sit at the desk and all I got was a sentence, I discipline myself. That 30 minutes, I'm going to sit here and stare at this screen for 30 minutes. And,
But I am.
yeah, right. And sometimes that was sitting back like this, drinking an iced tea and thinking about what direction the story was taking. That's working on it, even if you're not writing.
That's true. That's true. You can be working in the planning stage without actually putting words to paper, theoretically, and still working on your story.
And I'll know, me personally, because I'm a systematic person, things have to be done in order. I always started with a plot map. You know, who's this person? How do they connect to this person? What's that story arc? I put all that down first. Then it's just a matter of picking one of those things off of that and being like, okay, what's that story? And then just typing the stories. You should be excited. That's why I talk about mindset, state of mind. This is your book, my man, my girl. You know what I mean? Like this you're writing this for other people. It shouldn't be drudgery. Other shit stuff, I'm sorry, that might happen in her life that kind of chokes it out of you or kind of wrecks the creative process sometimes. But you just got to sit with it. You have to sit with it.
That's perfect. Well, that actually brings a good question for people in just general. It's how much do you plot out before, or how much did you plot out before you got to actually write kind of the meat of the story, so to speak? Did you to what level of detail did you kind of have already pre-plotted out?
Well, for Razor Mist, I'll tell you the crazy thing about Razor Mist, kind of my method for that is I'm actually working on a plot map now. If I find the time and the resources to sit back and actually do it, a sequel to Razor Mist called Misty that takes place 5 years later after the events in that book. And so the weird thing about Razor Mist, like I said, I didn't have the last probably 4 or 5 chapters, the wrap up for that story until First Church of Mars, man, it went together in like a year. And it's basically just based on personal experiences that I had. It was easy to write. It was that one where I found the discipline to write daily. Okay? Then when I started taking the time to think, hey, this ties into that over there, man, I couldn't wait. There was times I'd sit down for 3 hours and write entire chapters.
Wow.
When it came together, I was like enthused about it. So that's why I come back to again. I think mindset's important. You got to find that's where my spirituality angle of all this enters in. Perhaps it's finding that way to find my peace. I'm the keeper of my peace, nobody else. And I get to decide if I want to give that away or not, and I don't want to give it away anymore. Flush those people out of your life or whatever causes that stuff in your life. Get yourself spiritually together. Then I think it's easier to make yourself do the things you got to do, I feel like.
Yeah, and it was interesting that you were also mentioning how even though you started this one project and it was taking years and years, you kind of side tangent into another one, which put itself so together, and that actually helped you go back to the first. Because I know in my personal experience, I had the reason why I wanted to become an author was this one whole series that I knew I was going to write one day. I knew I wanted to write it, but I, for whatever reason, was hesitating. I wanted to make sure I knew the craft a little better and was a little more confident as a writer. So I ended up writing a completely different series first, and made me far more confident to go back to my passion project, which is one I had been wanting to from the start, which is the Jet Chronicles. So I'm, releasing books out of the Jet Chronicles now, even though it was the first one ever conceptualized. It's being finally produced right now, and I have obviously other series that I've done in the meantime, but it just kind of worked out in the favor and allowed, I think things happened for the right way in the right time zone for that. So things happen for a reason, and it worked out well for me.
Outstanding. Do you think, not my personal experience, but I wonder, do you think finding a publisher and moving through and navigating those things are more difficult than a female than a male?
I don't know. I do not know. I am an indie author, so I actually self-publish entirely on my own.
Nice.
I know a lot of the people who I'm close with are also indie authors, but I, know people who do hybrid, small press, big press as well. And so if one gender finds it harder than another, I'm not sure.
Right. You're just doing your own thing. That's great.
But I know when it gets to like the bigger publishing houses, they are definitely really interested in what they're predicting the next trend is. And if you're not on trend, they're probably not going to look at you. So if whatever you're writing, whatever you're passionate about could be 100% valid, fantastic work. But if it's not to their trend, they're not going to look at you necessarily.
Right.
So that definitely, I think that's a factor more so than
Gender.
some of the other things like gender.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So the stories that you write, it's always a great curiosity to me. Are these characters in these stories something that you carried around with you as a little girl that you finally get to write as an adult, or is it something you walked into?
Both. It just depends on the
Yeah.
series. So
Okay.
the series that the Jed Chronicles is my young adult portal fantasy because I'm a epic fantasy author. Adventure fantasy. It's a little more Tolkien-esque, but it has a multiverse of 12 magical planets, and all those characters in the multiverse were invented, so to speak, during my imaginary play with my sister as a child.
Nice.
And obviously, I've updated them over the
Right.
years, but that they're the reason why I wanted to write was to share this concept, this vibrant multiverse. Some of the other book series came about, they're a little more current. Their concepts came about, but they're all in the epic fantasy brackets. My passion for Norse mythology influenced the Guardian Speaker, which is my dark fantasy, Viking fantasy for adults. And, that one's I started writing probably about 4 years ago, 5 years ago,
Mm-hmm.
putting the, coming up with those concepts too. And so I have 8 of those out right now of the 16 that will be probably in total. But so it's a little bit of both. Some of them, yes, I did pull around from since childhood,
Right.
and it was a lot of fun. And others are characters that, you know, once they kind of manifested in my mind, I started writing their story down pretty quickly afterwards. And I still have plenty of other characters that I would love to get to. I just need to finish the other 2 series that I'm releasing because you should. My recommendation to people: publish one at a time. Don't do what I do. Do as I say,
Right.
not as I do. Don't
Slow
publish 2
down.
series at the same time. That wasn't smart. That's a little overwhelming.
However, you got to
But
capitalize when your stocks are up, right?
that's true too. That's true
Right.
too. So now that you're talking about creating a sequel to one of your books, your sequel being Misty, when did you decide you were going to write Misty? When did you decide, oh, I really want to come back to this 5 years after this book leaves
Quite
off?
honestly, because I had a couple extra chapters, it didn't fit in Razor Mist. Because on the timeline, it felt like this is something that can't have happened yet, kind of.
Mm-hmm.
It's a neat bonus fact about Razor Mist is that every character in that book is loosely based on a person that I know.
Oh,
I will never put
interesting.
those names out there because some of those are negative characters in there, but kind of how the story plays out. And then for
Mm-hmm.
me, that was helpful for me to loosely base a character on a person that I know because it gave me a springboard for now I can plug that person into. And the other benefit to that, though, is that these are common characters. So there's a good book. I feel like you have at least one person in that book you can relate to.
Of course, absolutely.
And so there's different. I mean, there's a little piece of me in all of them.
Yeah, yes,
And
of course.
one character in the book is literally based on one of my middle school crush.
Oh, that's great,
Yep.
actually.
Who I never saw again after middle school. I'm with the Queen now. The Queen and I just celebrated 27 years Thanksgiving last year.
Wow,
Mm-hmm.
congrats.
Yeah. And at least 25 of those have been outstanding. The Queen would say probably less. I don't know, maybe about the same. Lots of struggle.
That,
Lots of
that's
struggle.
fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
No, it is always interesting talking to authors and trying to figure out, well, not finding out if they choose to base any of their characters off real people or if they choose not to, because there are people who do either or both. I have the Jed Chronicles. I wrote myself in to be the main character. One, because I'm an author and I can,
Right.
and two,
This is
that was
my
my
world.
alter
Why not
ego
yours?
as a child. When I was inventing that multiverse, that was a character who was me. And so that's a fun thing, and people kind of laugh and chuckle. They're like, "Your main character is Katie. You're Katharine." I was like, "Yes, yes,
Oh, see what I did there?
that's a reason. There's a reason for that." But a lot of the times, I choose not to. I don't base any of my characters off any people, though maybe a personality quirk or an experience that I've had with someone else that I put in. Again, it's that relatability. There is that I write fantasy, but the best fantasy makes it feel believable.
Right. The
So
stuff that could actually
relatability is a
happen is
big
the
thing.
best stuff. That's
Mm-hmm.
one of my favorite authors, Dean Koontz. A lot of his
Yeah.
work I find is that kind of man. crazy people in the world that they're unpredictable and stuff happens and could happen. Yeah. Good stuff.
There's a comment popped up that said, I came up with a character named Dawn Star. That's actually a very nice name. I like that.
So where do you get your...
Huh? Sorry, what?
You first.
Oh, I was asking, where do you get your character names then? Obviously, you're not trying to use any person's name that you were inspired by, but where do those names then come from?
Oh, I'm dancing dangerously close here.
Uh-oh. Okay, well, we can skip it. We can move on.
Some names are the characters are just kind of a mixture of the letters of the names of the actual people. Oh. In one case, oh God, man. It's okay. Like people are understand. Maybe I can explain it this way. As I was writing this book, I was bringing the chapters to my wife to read to her. So the character, when she had the bonus of me explaining to her, here's who this person is based on. So there's a rich, deeper meaning to her to this story than probably anybody else. In the futures I kind of had to imagine and kind of put together for those people. That probably isn't the way things turned out. Given, for example, the middle school crush. Never saw her again after middle school, and she's a full adult person. I don't want to give too much away of the story, but I don't. At the risk of that person finding out who they are and me doing a book signing somewhere and being like, "What's up? You killed me in cancer," when whatever happened. You know what I mean? I'm like, well, technically it wasn't you, and I haven't seen you since middle school, so.
Of course not.
Right.
But another comment popped up and. Sorry.
There's one character in it that she starts out as a child religiously raised. And kind of that. How many other, young people that I've done counseling with and adults who just grew up in that stifling, religious, strict environment. And as soon as they become adults, they explode out into a world they're not ready for. And the results of that's usually pretty bad. But this girl, like, man, I gotta be real careful. Not saying it's just I'm used to talking to the queen about these chapters, and she knows what we're talking about, so I can say, the one that's based on so and so. And she's like, "Oh, okay, yeah." Can't do that.
Yes.
But you could see that. I haven't seen this person since she was a child, probably early middle school age. And everybody's friends with everybody on Facebook. So you see, kind of pictures of how a person's life unfolds. And I'll tell you, I could have called it. But the kind of counseling and the connection that I kind of have with people, and they get out into the world they're not ready for, and they have this religious structure that's not useful practically in the world around them, and they find themselves in situations they know how to get out of.
That's true. We have a couple comments pop up saying, I did a concept drawing of Dawn Star. It's on TikTok profile, and they get character names from baby book names. Books from baby book names. That's actually a smart one, too. I've talked to people, and I've heard literally everything from, promise you, throwing Scrabble things down, seeing what connects. I have baby book names or top 100 names and going down from A to B, both men and women. I've done a little bit of everything from totally making up a name, again, fantasy, to most of my characters nowadays are based, I do a lot of research and try to have a meaning behind the name when I select them, but people do pretty much everything, so that's pretty cool.
I don't know if you find it to be generally true when you're walking around the world that how much a person looks like their name. I don't know if that's true or not.
I'll have to start paying attention.
Who does your cover art? Because you're independent and everything. Who does that for you?
Well, it's kind of funny because just like you are also an artist, I'm also an artist, but my type of art is not what I want for my covers. I do reverse glass painting. I focus on pet portraiture and animal portraiture, totally different things. So I currently work with 2 different cover designers. I found 2 totally different ways. One of them did the Incarn Saga, my debut series, as well as It's Always Dark in Here, but the Guardian Speaker series as well. And I found her through the platform called Fiverr. A lot of people have love-hate with that platform because you get what you pay for and do your research, because you could get a really good artist. You could get one that's not so good. So, keep that in mind. The
Right.
other one I found off, because there are different groups on other platforms like Facebook that are there just for authors to find cover designers, and cover designers will show examples or sell their ready-mades on those platforms. And I ended up stumbling across a designer who has worked for some of the big five publishers as well. And she did, for the people who know fantasy books at the moment, she did one of the non-US book covers for Six of Crows, which has been a fairly popular book in the fantasy realm, but love her to death. And so she's doing my covers for the Jet Chronicles, my young adult porter fantasy. With the third one is going to launch a Kickstarter tomorrow, so that's exciting.
Nice.
But yeah, so I've done different ways, and again, indie authors find them cover designers all across the board, and some do it themselves if they're pretty confident.
Right.
I'm not confident in that particular type of skill.
Right. Well, so I think the challenge, I think, at least from the artist's standpoint, I can never get down perfectly on paper or any other medium exactly what the other person has in mind.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I have an image usually in my mind when I have an idea to create art, and it almost never, I can't get it. I have, for every single drawing that I have or painting that I have, it's a result of 10 or 15 crumbled up, angrily thrown out. Nope, this ain't it. Attempts at stuff. So apparently you found work that you're satisfied with.
Oh yeah,
sharp.
yeah.
Those covers are sharp.
Oh, thank you. Mm-hmm. But for everybody, you have to do your research. As well. Do your research, especially if you're in full control of it versus having someone. Because again, if you go through a publishing house or group, they may have more control of that than you do. So just understand where your control lies. And I guess the rule of thumb is try to be on trend as possible for whatever your genre and subgenres are. Because again, you want to catch the attention of people, but catch the attention of the right people who will be your hopefully future readers and fans.
Right. The Queen and I say all the time, it only takes one person, man. One person who gets a hold of this that has the right kind of influence or whatever, and then boom, then it takes off.
And and like one of the biggest rules of thumb that I love, I think Mark Dawson, he's a big name in the indie publishing world, but he's says this multiple times, where it's easier to sell 10 books to one person than one book to 10 people. So if you find that fan who's going to buy all your stuff, that not only makes your life easier, but that's great.
Right. Well, anybody in my gravity knows this, but people that your followers might not know, dude. And I mean this when I say it. If you buy one of my books and you find out I'm going to be speaking anywhere nearby where you are, bring it to me and I'll sign it for you. If I got to be there till midnight, part of this is that my desire to meet people and talk to people and kind of hear their stories and share stories with people. You know what I mean? It's what I hope to do. I can also speak on First Church of Mars. Razor Mist is just kind of a story that took place over years. The kind of opening thing that set First Church of Mars on my heart. The Mars rover, I found out, I read an article. I tell the longer version of the story in the book. The Mars rover, the first one that landed, every year on the anniversary of the day that it landed on Mars and started broadcasting, it would stop and with a series of beeps and clicks sing happy birthday to itself. And I found out that day is August 5th, the same day as my birthday. So it's been for like 10 years now. Every year on my birthday, I stop, I pour out a drink, or I acknowledge my buddy up on Mars. So that's how First Church of Mars, like, why Mars? That's why Mars. Because ideally that first congregation gets, that thing's up there somewhere, and hopefully, it'll be a trophy in somewhere nearby. Somebody can sing, actually, happy birthday to that lonely. And then that kind of spiritually felt like my journey in Christianity at the time. That lonely robot up on Mars.
Wow.
It's a dry spiritual journey,
And that's another thing that I always find interesting talking to different authors is where they get their titles from. What was it that inspired? Was it a certain quote or a character, or in the nonfiction realm, what was it that pulled you to title your work the way you titled it? I see some of the people who are chiming in right now are also poets, writers, some draw, and talking. There's a little chat here about questioning about AI art and book covers. My only thing I'll pause and say, the only thing about AI art is you always just have to figure out where their core algorithms pull their images and if they're taking it from another artist, and then that's a big no-no. Also making sure when you design using an AI program, what permissions do you have to then reuse that art piece you created off of AI thing on a larger scale, because a lot of them actually say this is for personal use, not commercial. So always be aware about these things and everything. But yeah, so when
I
you
love creating AI art. It broke my heart when I found out I make some badass images in AI art. You can't sell them. You can't copyright those, even though it's my prompt that makes the image. The image that's created, I might be wrong, but I think I've recently
a lot of them actually say you can't use them for commercial use.
Right,
so,
what a bummer,
because
I'm making some
they're
killer art.
taking images from other artists too. So it's a whole interesting thing, but it's its own thing. One question that popped up, and this is an interesting one, is how did you get your first story published? So when you wrote your story, because that's the first thing, write your story, did you look for a literary agent? How did you find your publisher?
Well, Page Publishing is a self-publishing thing, but it's a financial arrangement that they basically handle everything, but you handle the creative end and they handle the business end, basically.
Very nice.
Yeah, it's been tremendous for me. I will use them again, unless I get myself in a situation where I can do what you're doing and publish it myself. But it's a money game. It's you got to put you have to have financially be able to feed into it. That's also another big reason why it took 15 years. I could look at it negatively and say, well, I financially was destitute, and that's why Razor Mist wasn't written, and make it a negative, sad story. Or I can say, I just didn't finish Razor Mist because it was his counterpart to this other book. The other one had to be written first. And it's a better positive way to look at it. It just couldn't be finished yet. But it's definitely, no matter what, you got to have some money to feed into the process. Page, so I submitted to it as soon as I had a finished work. First Church of Mars, I began, I looked at literary agents and I looked at publishers and I looked at the finances I had available. And of what I had available at the time, literally with income tax return, the Queen and I devoted a full income tax return to First Church of Mars. That's how that one got done. And then I had worked out a deal with Page, actually, because I knew that Razor Mist was going to be coming on the heels of First Church of Mars. The 2-book deal with them, that the second one was a little bit less.
Oh, okay, that's nice. And a good thing to be aware of too when you approach different companies, I never even realize that you could have different deals depending on how many you're actually signing on for initially, if that makes sense.
Well, and of course, that was hinged upon, well, and that's the other thing too, man, knowing your audience. And I didn't write these books for the church. These books are not for, this is for the person, like how many grandmothers, church grandmas who come up to me and say, oh, will you please pray for my grandson? He's out in the world and he ain't coming to church. And I'm like, you're the reason he's not coming to church. Like, right? And so I don't know what you expect me to do. So that it's that person, that audience. So while I know my audience, publishing wise, I was pigeonholed into, like, I wouldn't classify these as, quote, Christian books, because I don't want to get stuck in the Christian subculture with them, if that makes sense. No, I mean for a larger audience for these. And so there was that hindrance in the publishing process that was unexpected for me as well.
Well, let me ask, since we're rounding the end of the hour, and I always want to make sure I ask this, and it kind of works well with what you were just saying, is for people who are interested in your books, you mentioned in the beginning, they're found on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, they're wide, so you can find them places. If they're interested in following you, obviously, you here on this platform, where else can people find you? Do you have a website? Do you have a newsletter? What other social?
I have,
where can people find you?
I have website, TTWM, www.ttmtruth.com. That's all ministry, everything. My art, I have a blog that I'm going to try to be more faithful. I have some video sermons. I just recorded one of those here on TikTok. I'm on TikTok. I'm on Facebook as Dennis McFarland and as Thicker Than Water Ministries, the name of the ministry, hence TTWM Truth, the website. I would like to talk briefly.
And I'll try to find the information and put it down when I repurpose this on YouTube. I'll put your links below so people can hopefully find you easily if they're interested. I would
appreciate it. Hey, come and find me. If you see me somewhere, stop me and talk to me. If there's time, I actually would like to take a minute to talk about where we are today. So March of last year, like 15-year process. And the Queen and I finally, I took an early retirement from my job, and we had about $11,000 in the bank at the time. March of last year, we got the business structure in place. Her and I were going to start traveling. We had a table set up with my art, my books, and we were just it was going to be our hobby. April of last year, it's an open case. We can't really talk about it, but we took custody of 3 littles to keep them out of the system and to keep them together. And it's still have no idea what the future of that looks like. But of course, we went from these great plans and this great stuff we were going to go do to now we're raising children in our old age. And look, and I'm not bitter about it. And if that's what we wind up having to do, good. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. But I can't let this stuff die too. It is my hope that I can generate enough interest in this that instead of trying to figure out how I'm going to feed the family, we can figure out where we're going to take our vacations.
That would be fantastic.
Right. So that's the heart behind what we're doing. And it's been this last summer, man, the last probably 8 months of our life has been very difficult.
Yeah.
And you can't give up on it. If we're going to end on a positive note, man, you can't give up on it. You can set goals and you can make yourself do it every day. And it might not come together the way that you think it will. And you may have to readjust every single goal that you have, right? Mm-hmm. But do it. You got to make yourself do it, right? It's a better mindset. How do I make this happen? Then there's no way this can happen.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah. And I mean, that's the thing is like a lot of people who haven't written a book, I think genuinely have the story in them, but the difference is you have to find the time, the dedication to sit down and write. And it may be a couple minutes at the end of your day once you put kids down to bed, or you get up really early in the morning and right before, you go to work. Some authors that have done phenomenal, that's how they started. It was because they just grabbed hold and they made time and they stayed up late and they were exhausted and they wrote their books.
Right. And you got to believe that the world deserves this story. The world deserves this story. You got to believe that. And you got to push that story out into the world. And then you probably have experienced it differently, maybe as an independent versus, kind of how things slowly unrolled for me. Getting published is just the first part of the work.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, it's tremendous to hold that product. I have a product now. And this is a thing that lives and breathes in the world now. But that's just where it starts.
Yes.
So I think the discipline that you build in writing your book needs to carry into promoting your book, right? Even if life kind of chokes things out of you and makes it difficult for you, the dedication is the same, I think.
Absolutely. And it's a lot, especially if you haven't. I'm a person of habit, so if you haven't started that habit of sitting down and writing, it can be daunting. It can be very daunting. There are a lot of people who are not sure they can do it or are overwhelmed by that concept, but once you get into a good habit of sitting down and writing and putting your words to paper, that's the beginning. That's the beginning of something great.
Right.
And then I see this quote, and then you have to market it because I made that mistake. I wrote my first book, put it out for like a year or so, wondered why the world didn't just fall in love with it, was because I had no concept of marketing. Better now. Much better now, but it took me a while. Marketing is a whole other animal.
Right. Well, I don't even know you, Katharine, but what I really deeply appreciate about you is that you do this. Like, nobody knows who I am, and I've tapped out my friend circle. Like, they're sick of hearing about it, probably. And so, giving exposure to new people, I deeply appreciate you allowing me to come and do this. And super nice person. And do you check back with the people that you interview and do interviews later with them, see how things turn out?
I mean, usually I leave it open. I mean, I do these weekly, and I have multiple times had authors come back to me like, "Hey, I've published a couple more books, or I'm doing some new projects. Can I come back on?" And then we'll talk about, from there on. And once you cover the basics with an author and kind of learn each other, you can kind of dive deep into some topics sometimes, which is fun about. Maybe you just talk about marketing or advertising, which sounds completely boring for the reader side of things, but it's so fascinating and essential for the author side of things. But yeah, so yes, I do this. I try to do them once a week at least with other authors, and I'm happy to have people jump back on.
It's a big quote, big on my website, www.ttwmtruth.com, in big bold letters on there. If everybody helps everybody else with their come up, everybody comes up.
Yeah, I love that. I absolutely love that quote. Fantastic.
Okay.
Well, it was very nice to meet you
So
today.
nice to
And
meet you.
one thing I guess I will ask before our time runs out is there anything topic-wise that you would have liked to have covered that we have not covered yet, or any questions you would like to,
Oh, girl, I could have sat here. I set the rest of the afternoon aside for this. Not really. I mean, what I feel like what needed to be covered got covered. My spirituality is such that before I even sat down and went live with you, I took devotional time to say, please make sure that whatever I need to say gets said. Okay, so then I got to believe that it happened. You know, I got to walk around in that. So no, I don't have anything else. I'm happy how everything turned out.
Well, and I see one last comment pop up, and thank you for this one, but it says, I don't even read fantasy, and the algorithm brings me back to Katharine's lives often. Well, hopefully I don't bore you, because some of the stuff is kind of repetitive. On the other hand, I learn something new every time, and it's just fun to meet new people. At least for me. Sure. I'm a social person. I love meeting people. So, and it was very, very nice to meet you today.
So nice to meet you too. Hey, my new friend.
Yes, yes. Well, I will talk to you soon, and I will definitely be trying to keep in touch and hear how your next book, Misty, progress.
For sure. And dude, and this story's only going to get better. Mine and that one.
I love it. I love it. Right. Well, I will talk to you soon, and have a lovely afternoon.
Yes, you as well. Take care.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you.